Hello and welcome to this 5-minute teaching on the supernatural agape love of God. I'm Pastor Jack Shoup with Grace Fellowship of Georgetown, Kentucky, and we're looking at how we can tap into supernatural agape love. The scriptures instruct that we're to walk in it, but the question arises, how do we do it? We discovered it's going to require our faith. And the Bible calls us trees of righteousness. We'll look at that in a second here. But as trees of righteousness, we're to be rooted and grounded in the supernatural substance of God's agape love. Is to be the minerals, the substance we tap into to produce outward fruit of the Spirit. And the harvest, the world's going to come to that fruit. And so I want to read out of Isaiah chapter 61. I want to read out of verse number 3. It says, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion. It used to be full of mourning. Not anymore that you've tapped into supernatural love. To give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy, that's a fruit of the Spirit, for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called the trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. Now look at this. It says, once we get a hold of joy and praise, and we get free of mourning and gloom and heaviness, then we can be called the trees of righteousness. Until we start tapping into supernatural love, we're probably just a twig stuck in the ground. But God says, I want you rooted and grounded in the substance of agape, that you take it in as you process it, you spend time on my word, you spend time with me, you spend time in prayer. It's going to cause you to grow. And you will develop into a full-fledged tree, a tree of righteousness. And of course, that's your inner nature once you're born again. And it says you'll be the planting of the Lord. There's a lot of churches, a lot of preachers, a lot of Christians that it may be in doubt whether the Lord planted them or not. A lot of people are doing things by their own effort, their own strategies, their own trying to be nice and do good deeds. God says, I've got a supernatural bride I'm bringing forth. I'm bringing forth a tree of righteousness, trees of righteousness. And he says, through this, again, Isaiah 61:3, that God may be glorified. See, right now, not much of the church is glorifying God over what they see on the church. They see more judgment, criticism, and condemnation than they do anybody walking in supernatural agape. Now listen, we're to be those walking in holiness. We're to be those that establish a standard of righteousness in the world. But at the same time, we're not doing a whole lot of good by just condemning all the wicked. It makes them want to run from God. And so it says, we're to be trees of righteousness. And as trees of righteousness, we're producing the supernatural fruit of the Spirit. Now again, we've had a lot of the church over years. I've done it myself. We used to try to condemn in the harvest. We go on the streets with our little chick tracts. Maybe you had 3-color tracts, and we'd be handing them out telling people they need to escape hell. So many of the Bible tracts talk about, you can choose heaven and hell, and it'll show all these hellfires consuming people, and they're real. That's a real truth. But you're not going to get much of the harvest through fear. In fact, Romans chapter 2, verse 4 says that it's the goodness of God that draw men to repentance. God intends to bring in his last day harvest. He intends to be glorified through a bride, through a church, producing supernatural agape. And it's manifesting as joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, faith, meekness, and temperance. None of that fruit says critical attitudes, judgmental and condemning speech. It talks about the love of God being produced through us. We act as a standard, but we do it in love. And it says when we do that, we will bring in God's harvest. So again, God intends in these last days to be glorified by bringing in a harvest through love. Now, the Lord showed me this years ago, that I grew up fishing. I was a fishing addict. I loved to fish every chance I got. Sometimes I would catch some, sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes if I wouldn't catch anything, I'd just tie a weight and a hook, a treble hook, a 3-hook on my line, and try to snag something. And he says, what we're trying to do by trying to bring in people through judgment and condemnation and fear is like trying to snag something into the kingdom. But he says, just like Jesus, when he first started his ministry, he let down a net. And he drew in so many fish, the nets couldn't contain it. At the end of his ministry, again, He said, let down the nets, and they brought in 153 fish of every kind. They had fished all night, hadn't caught a thing. But when Jesus instructed them, when he was leading, they brought in a harvest of fish. And God said, in the end times, I'm gonna coat my church in the supernatural agape of God, and I'm going to use nets to bring in my harvest. But it requires us being rooted and grounded into the supernatural substance of agape. That's what we're learning how to do. Be blessed.